What is up, everyone? Welcome back to McMahon's Garage, where I try to build cool shit out of my garage. Today I kind of figured we'd go over the F250 and I'd kind of explain to you guys why I bought a Ford and sold my Ram, because I realize now that there's a lot of controversy going on in comments and stuff on why I sold a truck that I pretty much had perfect as far as like level 37s. The Cummins was there, it's a beautiful truck, but I still had issues with that truck. And I'm going to explain them to you and why I went to a Ford. So I'll start with the outside of the truck. So for one, on the Ford, this is a short bed. It's not a long bed. You still have 6 more inches of bed space compared to the short bed on the Ram. So whenever I have like my dirt bike in the bed of the truck and then a buddy's dirt bike in the bed, I can load a front tire in each corner. So one tire will go in that corner, one tire in this corner, and I can kick the rear tires into the middle and still close the tailgate. Whereas when we would load stuff up in the Ram, you would, if you could figure out how to lift the tailgate up and kind of have it at like a 45-degree angle, it would be closed more or less. But I would never do that because I didn't want to ruin the cables on the tailgate, so the tailgate would always be down. So with the Ford, I don't have to worry about that because I can close the tailgate, don't have to worry about gear flying out or anything really, and I can take 2 bikes in the bed of the truck, which was a huge plus for me. Another thing, I had originally bought that truck because I wanted a diesel, right? And one of the big things that I kind of was going back and forth with was like, do I stay with Ford because I like Ford, or do I get a Cummins because supposedly Cummins will have better fuel economy, which was kind of the main reason I went with a diesel anyway, because I wanted better fuel economy when towing. So I bought an inline 6, which is the Cummins, and after I did 37s, and yes, I know 37s is going to ruin fuel economy, but I was going to do that, or I'm going to do that to this truck anyway. After doing 37s on the Ram, I was at like at most 16 miles to the gallon on the highway. So this truck, the way it sits now, completely stock, I'm at 20 miles to the gallon on the highway, and that's after I trim the valence on the front. So I would have to say probably gonna get like 17, 18 miles to the gallon when this thing finally gets 37s. And I do believe that's in part to the 10-speed transmission that's in this thing. So if Ford didn't have that torque shift 10-speed transmission, I do not think it would get the miles per gallon that it does get. But that's one of the things I didn't take into consideration when I bought the Ram over the Ford. And so now I'm back to having a Ford, and I would recommend, like, if that was your thing, the fuel economy on the Cummins, it's not even a thing, because now that Ford has a 10-speed transmission in the Power Stroke, it's better to have the Power Stroke than it is to have the Cummins, unless you're just the Cummins fanboy, which I'm really don't give a shit. It's like whatever truck is better for me, and then in this case it was the Ford. So that's the second thing that I wanted to talk about why I finally went to a Ford. Thirdly, moving into the back seat. So I know I've talked about this in other videos, but the Ford has a flat seat. So whereas, sorry, excuse my mess, but whereas in the Ram, right here, you would have the transmission hump because an inline 6 sits into the cab versus the V8 is in the engine bay. So the transmission will come into the cab and you'll have this huge hump. Whereas on the Ford, it's flat all the way across and it's flat underneath the seats. So one of the things I wanted in my truck was a sub. Ford puts the sub behind the seat, Ram puts it under the seat. So that's kind of a pain in the ass, especially when you have car seats, because I'm not gonna take the car seat out just to get underneath the seat. Whereas with this one, I can throw shit underneath the seat and it's not a big deal. So back seat room was a huge thing, which brings me to my fourth topic, which is the leg room from the front of the car seat to the back of my seat. So in the Ram, I came to I think it was like 5.5 inches more leg room from the front of this seat to the back of my seat. I think that might be due to the fact of how skinny the seats are in the Ford versus the Ram. Mind you, the Ram, I did have cloth seats, so it was the Bighorn. I don't know if that makes any difference. I didn't have leather seats in that, so I can't really compare like leather to leather, but in that truck, comparing the Ram to the Ford, there's significantly more leg room. in the back of the truck versus the Ram, which was like a huge thing for me because I got tired of my kids kicking my seat when we go on road trips or we go anywhere really. I got tired of my daughter kicking the back of my seat. So it's another reason why I went to Ford. And then since we're on the subject of cabin issues, let's go to the front and we can talk about the issues that I was having with my knee when we were going on long road trips. So up here in the front, like I said before, with the inline six and the Cummins, the engine's gonna sit way back into the cab just because the engine is longer than what a V8 would be. So whereas in the Ram, you're gonna have the engine come in pretty much about, like I would say, like right here if I had to guess. So you'll have like a little hump right here that comes into the throttle, and it becomes an issue for me because as I have my foot on the pedal like so, I have to have my heel kicked out because there's this bump right here. So then it puts all kinds of pressure on the inside or outside of my knee when we're going on road trips. And yes, I understand you can use cruise control, right? That's why cruise control is there. But I still can't put my leg far enough back to be comfortable to where I'm not touching that bump. So not having the bump in the front is an awesome thing. And then on top of it, not having a bump on this side, the passenger side was even worse. So if my wife was to drive on a road trip, it was a pain in the ass because I didn't want to sit over there and not be able to stretch my legs straight out, which might not be an issue for some people. I'm 6'1", so if you're, I don't know, in the 6 foot range, having the Ram is definitely a pain in the ass. I'm just gonna put it out there. Someone's gonna complain, say, oh, you can move your feet to the side. I'm like, dude, I want my feet to go straight forward, and I don't want to have to compensate for the lack of leg room in my truck. So that's why I went to a Ford as far as like leg room goes. All right, guys, so that's gonna be it for this episode. Those are like kind of the main things that was really frustrating for me on the Ram, which is why I went back to a Ford anyway. But stay tuned because I had a couple of you ask about doing a kind of review of the truck driving and then just engine noise, because you know, I want my truck to sound like a truck, and it doesn't sound like a truck right now. So maybe I'll modify the exhaust and delete this thing. Just kidding, I'm not gonna delete it, but we'll see when that happens. And then one of the things that kind of like, it's a plus to having the Ford, but I didn't really want to throw it in the video, but this little tailgate step right here, oh my God, it works so good for loading dirt bikes, especially when this thing finally gets 37s and leveling kit on it. You don't have to try and do the splits to get in the back of your truck. But that's it, guys. That's all I wanted to talk about for this video, just so you guys could kind of get an idea of like what you're gonna be, I want to say, upgrading to from a Ram, because you are upgrading to the nonsense that you have to deal with in that truck. But then again, people might think the other way around, like that's a bad thing for them. But for me personally, that's just how it was. So thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate your time. Like and subscribe to the videos, please. And I'll see you next time.